All right, and good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is good to see you. I welcome you this Shabbat evening to our Bible study. Today is a very special day for us as Hebrews. Today is actually the Purim celebration. And for those of you who do not know, today is a day where we take some time to recognize the sacrifice of Esther. If you remember the story of Esther, Haman had ordered a massacre of the Jews, but Mordecai guided Esther, and because of her simplicity, her humility, and her purity, she was able to go before the king and actually save the entire nation of Jews. So today is a very special day in our lives. I hope you are doing well. I see a number of you are on. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. It is good to see you. It's good to have you on the program. And I hope that as we study together, that we will really be blessed by our Heavenly Father. All right, I would love to know if you are hearing me. If you can give me a thumbs up or a yes, just let me know that you are hearing me. And also let me know if you are seeing the
Yes,
presentation this
I'm
evening.
hearing. Yes, I'm hearing and I'm seeing.
Okay. Shalom. Okay. Are you hearing me, guys?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Letitia. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you so much. All right. So today we are on the Hebrew alphabet number 10. Number 10, the 10th letter, which is the Yod. The Yod is the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It is represented by the letter I, which is the I. Sometimes it is used as the I, as in the letter Y. So that is the Yod. As you can see from the picture, it is represented by the hand. The pictograph is the hand, and it means to work or to throw or to worship or a demonstration of strength. So I'm going to go to the pictograph so you can see how the Hebrews, how our ancestors came across this hand. So if you look at the pictograph and just imagine your hand like this, down across, if you imagine your hand like this, then you can actually see that Yod right there in place. The paleo is there for you to see as well. And in the center, you will see the modern representation of the Yod. So that is what it looks like. The Hebrew word for hand is actually yad, spelled Y-A-W-D or Y-A-D. It's a yad and it's a yod and a dalet, and that gives us yad for the word hand. It is represented by the numerical value of 14, and we are told that we have 14 joints in our fingers, interestingly. I thought I was sharing my screen.
Try that.
Okay, hold on.
Stop sharing.
Stop share.
And then quick share screen. And then the phone basic. And then
Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the first slide. Since you were hearing, but you absolutely were not seeing a thing. Okay, so there we go. All right, the Yod, which is a 10th letter represented, it means hand, work, throw, worship, or strength. All right, so that's what I was showing you about. If you look at your hand, so you can see go down across and you can see this part of the hand. If you look at it that way, then it will give you a better reflection of what we're talking about. So that is a picture of the Yod. In the middle, you will see the modern script. So when you are reading Hebrew, that is what it will look like, the Yod. All right. Now, the Hebrew word for hand is actually yad, spelled Y-A-W-D or Y-A-D. It is a yod and a dalet come together to give us the word yad. And we are told that there are 14 joints in our fingers. In the Bible, the yod is very, very important. And I know if I ask you, think about a scripture with the word hand in it, you can think of several scriptures. Exodus 14 verse 30 says, "That day Yahuwah saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians laying dead on the shore." And I'm going to read a few verses today so you can really see that strength and that power of Yahuwah as we reflect on the Yod today. Exodus 14 verse 31 says, "And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of Yahuwah displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared Yahuwah and put their trust in him and in Moshe, his servant." Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your Elohim. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." And every time I see right hand in the Bible, I think of us as a people. We know that the right hand is the more powerful hand. Of course, some persons are left-handed, some persons are ambidextrous, but for the majority of us, we are right-handed people, and this is where our strength is. So we can imagine why or Abaya talks about the right hand of his righteousness to display his strength and his majesty. Matthew 22 verse 44 said, "Yahuwah said to my Elohim, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet." 1 Peter 2 verse 24, "He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed." I want to end this presentation on the Yod by reading for you Exodus chapter 14. If you want to go there, that's perfectly fine. Exodus 14, I'm going to read from verse 30, and then we're going to go into 15, and I'm going to stop at verse 6. So I'm going to start at Exodus 14 verse 30, then I'm going to go into verse 15, and I'm going to stop at verse 6. And I want you to listen to just the power of this Yod. That's what I want to emphasize on this evening. The power of this Yod. Verse 30 said, "Thus Yahuwah saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which Yahuwah did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared Yahuwah and believed on him and his servant Moshe." Chapter 15. "Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto Yahuwah, and spake, saying, I will sing unto Yahuwah, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. Yahuwah is my strength and a song, and he is become my salvation. He is my Elohim, and I will prepare him an habitation. My father's Elohim, I will exalt him. Yahuwah is a man of war. Yahuwah is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. Thy right hand, O Yahuwah, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Yahuwah, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. As we reflect on the Yod tonight, I pray that the right hand of his righteousness will cover us every day as we live for him. Shabbat shalom, and shalom to you all and to your family.
Just do it. Shabbat shalom. Shalom, shalom. That was nice.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Shalom, shalom, shalom. How are you? How are you all? How's everyone doing?
Too bad, not too bad.
Are you talking?
Sorry.
Wait, hold on. I can't hear you guys. I'm sorry. Let me try to change the speaker. Give me 1 second. The speaker now work.
What speaker?
We can't hear them.
Alright, give me a second.
I think the output needs to. We're going to change the output.
Hi, can you hear us now?
I think I might have it. Yeah, let me just try to change the output real quick so I can actually hear you all when you speak. All right, can someone say something real quick?
I can hear more, but apparently we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. We're good. Hello, shalom. Hi, Lee.
Okay. Yes, I'm hearing you, Chef.
Oh, Miss Burke.
Hi, how you doing?
Welcome everybody. Welcome Keith, Amor, Yash, Rachel, Rita, Chris, Samantha, Shay, hey, Joy, Ariana. Welcome everybody. How are you guys feeling today? How was this week for everyone?
Nice.
Outstanding. Doing good.
Can't complain. Been a week of restoration myself.
Word. That's lovely. What about you, Shay? Are you talking? Because your screen is on.
Yeah, I'm here. I had a good week. It was pretty good.
Amazing. Yash, when you speak of restoration, what do you mean?
I do recall one of the times we did have a conversation about like on my walk and things that I've experienced as revealed through the Holy Spirit. Sometimes I feel like I may have a relapse in certain cases, and typically when I feel that way, whenever I'm led to repentance or humility, a lot of times in a similar accord, shortly after, the Most High Himself will reveal to me the usefulness of that. Some of the times I realize that He uses us because we are the battle axes and tools of the Most High as His sons or His children. So He does use us. A lot of times from our perspective, we can't understand how things might be looking from a quote-unquote bird's eye view. A lot of times we definitely do have to walk by faith and not by sight. But as long as we understand and we are surrounded by His word and we are in His presence when He gives us direction, if it is a case that in between one point and the next point, we might feel as if we are lost or have lost focus, if we can continue on the same path from the point to the point that He directs us in, more often than not, given that we don't deceive ourselves within our flesh, we are often given a moment of reflective restoration. So yeah, that's definitely where it's coming from. Just to give an outline of that, where that sentiment came from. But yeah, thanks for asking, by the way.
Yeah, man, no, that's powerful. That's finding purpose even in I guess your weakness. The Most High reveals your purpose, and that is a beautiful thing. But yeah, I'm glad we're having good weeks. Even in difficulties, even in struggles, I'm glad that we're seeing and searching out light in the midst of it all. So
Shabbat.
How was your guys' week? How was your week?
Oh, our week. I think it was a good week for me. In spite of everything, of course, we do have ups and downs, but yeah, it was a good week, I think. Yeah, it was a good week, and I've seen where Yahuwah has done some stuff in my life brought some stuff to my attention as I looked in this topic that we've been looking at. And of course, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right. I've been meditating on passages of Exodus based on some discussion on Discord. That was very powerful. We're not done with that yet, but it does fit into what we're looking at because we're going to be diving deeper into Exodus. So, but my week has been good.
Yeah, thank you for asking. More, I'm pretty sure it was. I had an all right week. I think ups and downs, but all right. I think I'm figuring it out.
That's good.
Blessings.
Blessings, Stanley. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I was, when you gave us the homework, if you will, of Exodus.
Oh,
I've been doing the same thing, of just meditating and allowing the Spirit to direct me this week. And it's interesting that Yashikai mentioned faith, like you made the statement that we tend to use a lot, walking by faith and not by sight. And, I think we talked about the word imuna, what faith means in Hebrew.
Yes.
And it's interesting when we research what faith is versus what Christianity teaches. Like Christianity teaches is that faith is like saying faith in God, but we don't realize that's a passive statement. And so in studying Exodus, and we look at the word faith in imuna, it actually means not a passive. It means that you're almost saying support God. Like the context of imuna is not saying having faith in God, it's saying support God. In that context, saying rest on his covenant. So we have to relearn and start saying faith by not seeing or understand, or just being led, just blind faith. We actually have to understand that we're actually saying we're resting on his promises, on his covenant, and with a surety we believe that it's going to execute as he said it will. So it was just interesting, like when he mentioned it, like that's what just reading Exodus led me to the word imuna, which he mentioned, and it's just like, wow, we just have to unlearn the European meaning of faith and look at the Hebrew, and we actually learn that by saying statements like, and it's just not a knock on anybody, but it's just saying to really dive into what instead of getting passive, to get more affirmative, to realize when we say faith, we're actually not saying anything blind or that doesn't arouse the five senses. We're actually saying that we know the promises, we're 100% behind the promises, and we understand that he's going to execute it on our behalf like he said he would. So that's the understanding of the Hebrew context of faith. And I think we might have talked about that.
Yeah, we did. And thank you for that elaboration on it, because in fact we didn't go as deep as you just did in it. We just basically summarized it and look at its application, which you just said again, and we just summarized it to something being firmly placed in another, as opposed to the Christian idea of believing something without knowledge or proof.
Yeah, that's the perspective that I got. I thought it was curious, and I don't know if you kind of explained it as you went on, but it's I think it can be confusing to hear like the statement faith being to support God, because then the question arises of why does God need support? But I think it seems to line more towards like trusting in the support of who God already is and who he's always been. I'm not sure.
It's obedience. It just means obedience. The context when we say support God, obey his law or instructions.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that makes more sense, and I kind of get it too, because I think for a long time, faith for me was defined like abstract. It was defined as just like believing in what I can't see. Like, I don't know how this bill is gonna get paid this month, but I know it's gonna get paid this month, and I think that is still faith, right? But the approach that I guess I had towards it before was that I can't see a way, but I'm just going to believe that somehow it's going to happen. Whereas I think it's just taking that same concept and diving a bit deeper and saying, I can't see it, but because I know who God has been before, even if I can't feel it or believe it right now, I'm going to trust in who I've known him to already be. So it's less of that not knowing and actually more of, no, I actually know who God is, and I know
because he's proved it. He's proved it in time and time again. So it's not blind. You actually have proof. Because we always have to remind ourselves that the Hebrew language has to, each word, each syllable, everything has to arouse the five senses. If it does not connect to the five senses, it can't be emet or truth.
Yeah.
It's all concrete. It's nothing abstract about it.
Again, just a simple look at the word support, English word support, as you said earlier. When we think of support, we think of me supporting my child or whatever. But if you support an organization, it means that whatever the organization plans, you go along with it. Now you start to see support in a concrete way rather than an abstract of just doing this or doing that.
We do it every day in our jobs, right?
Every day, right.
And they have rules, they have regulations.
And you work by them.
You work by them. Like my title as my job is sales support role. And my job is to support the sales agents in the field in whatever they ask me to do. So whether it's quoting, whether it's ordering, I'm supporting. So it's an active role. It's not something passive. I'm actually involved. I'm on their conference calls. I may not be on the conference calls with the customer, but they're calling me, say, hey, Stanley, I need this. So it's active. It's nothing passive. Blind faith, or just saying faith as something I think of, that's passive. And what is the action?
Yes, we looked at Abraham at that time, and we understood that when he walked out by faith, as Shaul said in Shaul or Paul, because there are persons here who have not been on the chat before, and Shaul is Paul, so you'll hear us use different names at times. Now, he said that Abraham by faith, and we tend to look at Abraham stepping out. The faith part is walking into a land that he did not know. No, the faith part is being able to walk in that land because he knew Yahuwah, and his relationship, his life was firmly placed in Yahuwah.
So it's walking into the unknown with what you know.
Right. So faith then is something being firmly placed in another. So when your life, when your belief, when your hope is firmly placed in Yahuwah, that becomes faith. That then gives you the fortitude, or gives you the platform to move forward into the unknown. It's not the unknown that you trust. It is the known, who is Yahuwah. So faith then looks back, and hope looks forward.
It makes me think of I don't know if it was Paul who was writing about this. No, it was James. It was James when he talks about your faith being tried. And for one, this week I started a Hebrew class this week, and we were looking at the letter. I can't remember which letter it is, but it means like tent peg. And the image that we were given was that, when you try a tent peg, like when you're setting up a tent and you knock the nail into the ground to put the rope on, right? You don't just knock it there a couple times and leave it like it's good. You try it, like you wiggle it to make sure it's not going to move when the storms come, and you put pressure on it to make sure that it's going to stay in place. And I think oftentimes it's how the Most High works with us in our faith, where he not only gives us like the belief, but then he allows us to be tried in our faith. He allows us to be like shaken and moved to see like whether or not what he's implemented in us will stand firm, not only when he's close, but when he may seem distant, when things may seem hard. We're being tested and moved to see if our faith and our foundation in him and our trust in him will remain in place, And I think this is an interesting way to look at trials when they come your way too. You know, that when that's shaking you, when that moving you, when that turbulence comes, it may be an opportunity, because it can be so easy to take that as an opportunity to doubt, but it may be an opportunity to actually dive even more into faith. When you don't feel like it, when you don't feel him close, when you can't feel his presence, what can you base your foundation on? And I think at that moment, it's when you reflect not on who you may feel like he is right now, but who he's already been in your life,
and what he's done,
and what he's done in your life already. And I think settling into that foundation, or focusing in on that foundation, is what deepens, I think, that faith, that being firmly placed.
And when Shaul says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word, and how can they hear if they don't have a messenger? He was speaking specifically. Remember that Yahuwah said in Deuteronomy 6 that they should repeat these things of his work to their children and their children's children. So when Shaul says that, he was actually referring back to Torah to say, look, faith comes by hearing. By you hearing what Yahuwah has done, and that's what he has prescribed, that these things I'm doing, which we're about to discuss, forms, function, and feast days, repeat them over your generations, because what you see happening here is going to happen again. And it is with the understanding of what you're hearing now, seeing it come to pass as you live in the present of the things prophesied of in the past, that gives you faith to know that, wow, if someone could have said that 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, and I'm living it today, then you cannot help but to say, wow, this must be God or Elohim. However, and I'm specific with the word I use here, because some people see that and still turn the next way. But one thing they cannot say is that they weren't at a point where they had to acknowledge that this must be. What they do with that afterward become another thing, because you can hear, but it doesn't mean that you're going to allow yourself to be firmly placed in him.
That's true. So we're looking at forms, functions, and feast days. Yes.
It's an exciting new series, and let me hear from those who have enjoyed the process of salvation. I know we didn't fully cover it in over 8 weeks, but it's going to be difficult to cover that in just 8 weeks in its entirety. But I mean, for those who have been here in and out or constantly, what are your thoughts on the process of salvation as we've discussed for the past 8 weeks?
Don't all go at once, you guys. We want to make sure we're ordered.
Get somebody else. I know I talk all the time.
I was gonna say, I've been here, I think, for 7 out of the 8 weeks, and I found it really insightful. Although I believe that I've already been saved, it was still kind of interesting, especially to see it from a Hebrew perspective, because I'd never really learned about that before. It was kind of good to see my knowledge grow in Hebrew, and to start picking up the words. And I feel like it gives a deeper meaning.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's amazing, Amor. I'm glad you feel that you've picked up more insight on what you already began. You know, I'm grateful for that. All praise.
And Amor is one of those persons who you can hear that passion, that desire to serve, that desire to walk in the ways of Yahuwah. Because remember, 3 weeks ago, Amor says, look, next Shabbat is going to be the first time I'm going to observe the Shabbat. And she just moves on her own steam. She's not waiting on the crowd. She's just walking as Yahuwah shows her light, and we must commend her for that.
All right. Absolutely. And Jessica says My mic doesn't work, but it most definitely helped me a lot. Being here, having people give me scriptures and educate me. Jessica, awesome. Much love to you as well, Jessica. And there's somebody here, Stephanie.
Yes, sir.
She says she's it's her first time being here. I want to real quick welcome you, Stephanie, for coming in today. And I hope that it's beneficial. Or I hope that Yah gives you some insight on something tonight.
I do want to say also, from my experiences being amongst brethren, like-minded brethren, is definitely something.
We're not hearing you. Yeshakai?
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very sorry about that.
Okay.
But I also wanted to reiterate my appreciation for this type of setting where I can relate with like-minded brethren in a more personal sense. I can honestly say that coming to the knowledge of who the people are as a walk it's been about 5 years, and through that walk, it's been a grueling process, and also the emphasis placed on being separate for a very long time, as has been expressed by some of the other brethren, did after getting to a point where I might have felt saturated to an extent without having like a reliable quote unquote trustworthy space. I would have been seeking understanding from whatever sources I might have found to be reputable at the time, right? And try to gain as much knowledge as I could with reference to the word, of course, right? And then there was a point in time where I was looking into my function with respect to Torah in my current space, and I did find myself at times thinking or wondering if I had veered off, as much as I personally would have always did my best to represent Torah and state with reference, my actions to Torah and doing my best there. What the space has definitely done for me has my emphasis on the idea of restoration, right? It's almost like coming back home after a war. Because how this place is really set up,
that's a news bite.
Man, I'm saying
that's really, a news bite. That statement is a news bite.
I'm saying it's a crazy reality there. It's been a roller coaster ride, emotionally, spiritually, as I can imagine. A lot of the brethren have also been through, and it's really hard a lot of times to remain grounded when you look around and there was literally like no, like-mindedness. So it's like also finding value in the purposes and things that, because as we know, all things do work to the benefit of those that truly do love the Most High and rest in His word. But it's definitely a sense of relief coming into a space where you feel supported. So it doesn't necessarily feel too much as if a war, but now it's like a restocking and revamped and put things back into perspective, so to speak. Not that there wasn't perspective before, but you have to rally back and get restock at everything. So it's just a really empowering feeling, and I give thanks regularly. So yeah, just wanted to know that.
Whoa, thanks.
Yeah, bro.
I think Laitisha.
All right, we're gonna let you say.
Hi.
We're gonna let you say.
Yeah. It's me. I wanted to say that I'm definitely in the process of salvation, I think, but I feel like this series provided me with a starting point to that place. I can just feel God calling me to something deeper than what I already am in. So I think this has helped me. And it's nice to just not sit back, but kind of learn through what other people have been through in this group. And yeah, just listen and take notes. I think I'm learning a lot. And this has definitely helped me to know where to start and where I'm going.
Wow.
Toda Rabba.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I just wanted to say I thoroughly enjoy being able to learn more about our Father. You know, we read and, you know, we've gone through life and, you know, we learn, you know, the word one way, you know, but now when you start getting down to the truth, if you will, I get so excited. I have to go tell somebody else and I have to show somebody else what I've learned. And the mere fact that y'all put it on YouTube, now we can go back if we miss something. You know, if we miss a week or two, we can go back and share. I believe I shared before. I pastor a church, and this has really it has made my thinking. It's reversed it, if you will, because there's some things that I thought I had an understanding. Now my understanding is much deeper.
Wow.
Than it was. And I'm able to share with my congregation. I'm able to share with my family, and the growth that I not only see in myself, but I see in them just by coming on here or, you know, going to YouTube and recapping what I missed. It's just phenomenal. And I just want to thank God for y'all for, you know, putting this on. It's really, really, really rich. And I appreciate it.
Whoa.
Toda Rabba.
Whoa. Yeah.
Toda Rabba is Hebrew for thanks multiplied.
Yeah. And
wow. Toda Yah is thank Yahuwah.
Yeah. Exactly. And thank him for real. You know, like I'm grateful that he's orchestrated this space, you know, for us and for everyone who, literally all of us, both the persons presenting or speaking and the persons who are coming in like weekly, you know. I'm grateful that we're all able to like really learn from each other and be able to like really sit before him, you know, and see him teach us in all these different ways through all these different people and experiences, you know. And so I really am just listening to that, Keith, like that just really touched me somewhere in my heart, you know. And I think it's so powerful too that, you know, as you learn this, you have a congregation that you can share this with and dive deeper into truth with.
Because it's not about us.
Yeah, right. It's just taking that truth in whichever way the Most High delivers it to you and then conveying it in the way that he has for you. And I think I'm just grateful for both being able to, you know, have my dad here, you know, to teach and to inspire and to also learn from everyone who interacts, everyone who speaks, you know, and to be able to just exist here together.
Okay. Stanley, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, all right. Because I saw you just... Okay.
No, can I also add something? Sorry.
Go ahead, young lady.
Yeah, also the lesson in Hebrew has also gotten me so excited that I'm finding myself having to Google the letters just throughout the day. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the lessons in the alphabet.
Yeah.
Sean is hearing you, so she does understand. She's hearing you.
Yeah, see, Keith got a chart. I can send you a chart. I don't know if
Keith just put up his chart. Yes.
Yeah, be studying that thing, man. I done went and got Rosetta Stone, and I'm learning Hebrew that way. I'm learning, man. I'm on it, man.
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah. And if you're not in the Discord, like that's a great place to like share these resources, the charts, the lessons, the, you know, things that we learn. Feel free to join that Discord and like send whatever resources or ask for any resources, and we're happy to share like throughout the week. But
and that was what I meant to say. Apologize to anybody that I see I've been tagged a couple times. I haven't even had Discord up. I didn't realize. So I was going back looking at some of the questions, but I'll save that and I'll tap into that. So just in case anybody's on, I apologize. I haven't even had Discord up.
Okay. That's okay.
Can I just say something? For those persons, because I just want to introduce you to this lady's website. It is the Hananya Project. I'm going to put it in the chat. She has a lot of resources. The alphabet for those persons who have children. She has like coloring pages and stories for children. I'm going to put it in the chat so those persons who are interested, you can check her out. But she does a really good job teaching the letters and just preparing resources for us. Like on Sabbath, we use some of our coloring books and we color them and we talk about the stories and we learn the Hebrew words. So she's really doing a good job, and she's the one that that I learned from her, so I can help us on this program as well. So I'll just put it in the chat so we all can check that out.
Yeah, that's a great channel. But
thank you.
Thank you.
Farms, function, and feast days.
Yes.
Why are we looking at this?
Because the world as a whole, myself included at one point, didn't really understand the function of the feast days, which of course was a form that a walk in Torah took. And there were some things in that point, like sacrifices specifically, was a form of pointing us to something else. So therefore, that form had the function of pointing us to a future event that would change the world. And that is why we're looking at forms, function, and feast days. What is the form? What is the function of that form? And how do they tie into feast days? And to do that, we have to first understand the foundation, because all of these feast days came out of an event that Yahuwah orchestrated to teach an object lesson that had three folds. It had the first lesson of instituting a nation. And in the process of salvation, we discussed how after Adam and Eve sinned, Yahuwah had a man, then that man had a family, then out of that family came Eber after the flood, then out of Eber then came the Hebrews, then the nation of Israel was formed again out of Jacob or Jacob. And we see that now that nation was formed to take Torah back to the entire world that has fallen away from Yahuwah through the fall at the beginning, through Adam and Eve. So here, what we find now is that these feast days, all this, it was set up around that setting to show the world what was about to happen. And so forms, function, and feast day is designed to give us a clearer understanding of the feast days, one. Two, its function then, its function now. And the second part of that, as it leads in, of that tripartite lesson, was that those were supposed to be pointing to a time when Christ would have come, when he would rebuild the waste places, as Isaiah 66 and 61 says, that he would restore the nation, and through that nation that has fallen, they would now go forth to the world. Not before we would have, of course, during that we would have gone into captivity again, which we are in that captivity now. But it points again after that captivity that is spoken about in Deuteronomy 28, is that he would come again and restore us. So the leaving of Egypt, when he says, tomorrow is going to be the first month of the first year for you, represents a reboot of time. That's going to happen when he comes again the second time. Notice that when they left, everything started over, even though the rest of the world was continuing. And all their days were now being structured around this calendar. So that reboot of time represents a reboot of time when the Ha Mashiach would come the second time to remove us from this captivity, when he says, when I come again the second time for the captivity of the house of Israel and Judah. And he speaks of where he's going to take us from. Now that was designed to point us to when he comes the first time and when he comes the second time. So in this whole Exodus story shows us the whole picture from Abraham to Joseph to Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, nation of Israel, all the way down. And we're going to see that whole thing play out in this form, function, and feast days as a continuation, as a build-up from the foundation of the process of salvation, because the Bible is actually a book of the process of salvation, and that is why many things are not written in the Bible that were not pertaining to salvation. So it was focused mainly on salvation, not that nothing else happened at that time, but that its primary focus was on the process of salvation from the fall to the final day in earth history.
Right. I think it's interesting because two things that come to mind for me in thinking about the forms, the function, and the feast days is that, well, first and foremost, that we often, and I think we all have done this or do this, we often neglect the form because we don't understand the function. And today, it's ironic, I guess, but I guess not so coincidental. Today is the day of Purim in Hebrew, which I only briefly know about because we're still learning these feast days. But from what I learned about it briefly, the day of Purim was a feast that our people hold to point us back to the event that happened in Esther when Yah rescued us out of the hand of that massacre that Haman was trying to do. And so it's a day when we would prepare a feast the night before, and then on that day we would go out and feed the poor, not with food that not with food that we wouldn't eat, but we feed them off the food of our own house, and then after we feed the poor, we come back home and we feed ourselves with that same feast. And so it's interesting because these things, these feasts, as like you mentioned, always point us back to a practical moment in our history to understand what Yah has done for us. As it says in Deuteronomy, teach these things to your children and children that they may know me. These feasts would be the things that remind your child, well, why are we eating? Why are we doing this? Well, this is what Yah did for our foreparents at this time and this time. And in that way, they would gain knowledge of who Yah is from a very young age, experiencing these feasts. And two, it points us to our function in the present time, being that if this feast reminds us of our own poverty and what Yah has done to rescue us, it then shows us and compels us to then go out into the world and exist in our function to then bring that light, bring the food, bring the feast to the world that the Most High has provided for you. And so this feast, at least for me, I see it in the brief knowledge that I have in those two folds, where it gives us deeper insight on who Yah is and what He's done for us, and then it compels us to exist in our function in a present tense. And that's one way I see like before, if you told me to celebrate Purim, I would say, well, that was in the Bible times, but without realizing the function would actually give me the very thing I'm searching for on a daily basis, that knowledge of Yah, that knowledge of self, that knowledge of purpose and function. And well, that's one feast, and I have another example, but I'll pause here and continue after.
Okay, so and it's interesting that the methodology that is used, many people frown upon the feast, but they have a favorite soap opera or series that they watch on TV. The methodology of Yahuwah in giving us a feast was to keep Himself before us, keep us walking in the path of righteousness. Yet we frown upon those feast days, and we use the same methodology to keep evil before us because we're entertained by murder on the TV every day. So the devil is using the same methodology. It's just not called a feast day, but it's before you every day. Even more than the feast days that comes once per year or once per week, or like Shabbat, which is once weekly. We frown upon those set apart times. Yet the world has set apart times on television and repeatedly reinforce those negative views on us. And we follow them like clockwork. but we question the method. And same method, repetition, same method, same thing, for a purpose. Yahuwah's purpose of these repetition is to instill, to have us walking in Torah, have us actually walking back to righteousness, as we discussed in the process of salvation. Have us actually practicing righteousness while it is not our nature. So that until when Yahushua can justify us, in other words, removing our sinful nature and giving us that heart of flesh. So that is why these feasts, but without saying too much, it's just interesting how we do these repetitious things and instill in ourselves different behaviors, different things.
Continue.
Okay, so tonight we want to look at, if you would go to the PowerPoint, and I've been trying to keep the PowerPoints short because I realize we have a more vibrant discussion when I'm not talking to you but with you. But I'm gonna still do a little bit of PowerPoint tonight, and we're gonna do some text. I write them, and I think better when I write with my pencil. But we want to look at a song, a famous artist, reggae artist, Bob Marley. 1 year before his death, he had cancer and he was going to die. He had been battling cancer. He had decided not to amputate and stuff like that. Won't get into that. Sufficing to say that in the last moments of his life, he recorded an album, Uprising, and the last song on that album, Redemption Song. And of all the music I've heard in my lifetime, none has ever captured the process of Egypt so eloquently. In fact, when I just knew this song, I didn't even hear that. It was until I learned about my Hebrew heritage. That was when I understood what the song was saying. In fact, I never liked Bob Marley songs. They were, but that was another thing. But he said, all pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit. But my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward, or we come in this generation. Now he's in this generation. Triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I've ever had, redemption songs, redemption songs. He uses the very word redemption. Even though he lived at a time closer to slavery, yet than we are today, yet he looked forward. Even though he understood in the next verse that it was not over, yet he looked forward. He went on to say, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy, because none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it, but we got to fulfill the book. He knew, as Deuteronomy says, that not Deuteronomy, Daniel, that which was determined shall be poured out. We would have lived to the very last portion of that which was determined because of our disobedience.
Prophecy.
Yeah, so he would have been seeing stuff, and if you know anything about Rastafarians in Jamaica, they read their Bible daily. They could have quoted scriptures that I had no idea that existed when I used to listen to them, because I grew up around them, still not understanding what they were saying. Still don't agree with some of the things they say, but just as not everything I have practices. But the point I'm making is that this song captures the essence of us being in the first Egypt, Mitzrayim, and us being in the second Egypt, and you shall go back to Egypt again in ships. And the way which I speak of you to you, you shall see no more. So it covers all our lives on to where we are today. And we are going to pick up our story in Genesis 37. And Stanley, can you find Genesis 30, or someone else? Genesis 37.
I want to point out too that Bob Marley also has a song called Exodus.
Yes.
That speaks to and really captures and embodies, at least to me, not only the experience of Moshe coming out of that first Egypt, but us now in this time experiencing an exodus from the captivity, both spiritual and physical, into the New Jerusalem and what the Most High has for us. And so it is very, very, very powerful. I was telling my friend, interesting enough, like maybe a few weeks ago, because he's a musician, and he's a musician and he listens to Bob Marley very much. And I was telling him, I asked him, I said, bro, do you understand what he's saying? And because a lot of times people experience the music and it's full of vibes and it's full of fun, but I was like, do you listen to what he's saying though? Do you read the lyrics and understand that he's speaking about us? A lot of these things that are said, it speaks to our experience and our reality and our history in a lot of ways. And so I really love that you pull up that song, the lyrics, to really go into it and understand that this pursuit that we have for salvation and this knowledge, this pursuit of knowledge of ourselves, deeper than the westernized understanding of
who
the
we
Bible,
are,
of who we are, is not something that's necessarily new. It's something many people have been trying to say for a very long time, but it's not always easy to break that veil. So I'm glad that the Most High is now opening our eyes to where you could have listened to that song your whole life and just enjoyed it, but no, you actually understand what he was trying to capture and convey with those words.
Yeah, I want to.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, I didn't know you were deliberately trying to. I can't.
Unmute. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I was saying, and one of the powerful things about the sequence of the conversation, as it relates to even someone with a lot of key knowledge about who we are, residing in what people would deem as the Rastafarian faith, right? So there's a lot of key principles that Rastafari have identified with for a very long time that they also would align with Torah, right? And even in a time when, even now, leading up to the fullness of us coming to a more complete understanding of who we are, as opposed to having a compartmentalized understanding, it's just a greater reflection of that same restoration that you were speaking about. This like a full restoration, because a lot of us had pieces, you know what I mean? Even in my short walk, respectfully, right, of 5 years, the last 5 years, but also very young. I mean, those people have been in this for quite some time. Sorry, I know that people have also been in this for quite some time. So with that being said, it definitely points to the Exodus, just like that, once we do wake up, but fully to the fullness,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're coming now. Yeah, it's coming now and bring us into the fullness of his truth and not just portions. And of course, we're all always learning. But you're right. Like, we're in that space now where the Most High is bringing us not only into the small parts, but the fullness of all of it and who he is.
And it's interesting though that Daniel says, the angel said to Daniel, shut up the books. For in the last days, knowledge shall increase. Remember that Daniel was shown this 400 years, especially in chapter 12. And when he spoke of the beginning of this time that would have led to the 400 years being the destruction of Jerusalem, and he specifically says, and after the war, desolations are determined. But we'll not get into that. But let's go to Genesis 37, because this forms the foundation of how we got to Egypt and the similarities of how we got here. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father. I'm going to start the reading, but I'm going to ask first Stanley to pick up as we move away from the screen. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations. You notice how it just gives you a platform in one verse and just moves. These are the generations of Jacob or Jacob. Joseph being 17 years. It's not going to give you a genealogy. You would think you're going into a genealogy, but it just gives you, as we said before, the salient point. Joseph being 17 years old was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Verse 2 immediately paints a picture of the personality of himself and his brethren. Immediately. 3.
What is that? What is that picture being painted here?
Obviously, he was in disagreement. It says evil report or their dysfunctional behavior. So the boys were doing stuff. They didn't have clubs, but it was now they were clubbing, pimping, all kind of stuff. They were doing stuff that they knew they shouldn't. Remember, Joseph was the second to last. He was down. So his brothers were older than he was, for the exception of a Benjamin.
A Benjamin, yeah. I say Benjamin was the baby. Yeah.
Right. So, but he knew Torah enough to know that what they were doing weren't right.
Or he was convicted enough, because they all knew it.
They all knew it, exactly.
They all knew it. He was the one convicted enough to say, hey, this is not right. Let me go tell daddy.
Right. So he brought this evil report, or the report of their dysfunctional or evil behavior. Okay. And we're saying dysfunctional because in Hebrew, I'm just saying for the persons who's here for the first time, in Hebrew, when something is good, it's functional. It is functioning based on how it was created to function. When it's evil, it's not functioning based on how it was created to function. So it's dysfunctional. So he brought the report of their dysfunctional behavior because they weren't acting according to Torah. So this, if you understand Hebrew and saw the word evil here, you understand immediately that they were acting in contravention or in disobedience to Torah. So immediately that verse paints that picture clearly. And we're just at verse 2, right? So verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now we need to unpack this a little before we move forward. He said, the Bible said that he loved them more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. So what happened to Benjamin? He must have been older when he had Benjamin. But if you look at the word ahava, which is love in Hebrew, which means to provide and protect a precious gift or as a precious gift, you would understand now that firstly, he sees Joseph as a precious gift. For whatever reason, the patriarchs always know the child that was going to do what's supposed to be done, because Yahweh is going to put that in you so you can treat the child in the way you should. Sometimes he's going to say it plainly in the way of Samson. Sometimes you're going to see it in the way of Moses. And sometimes, for whatever reason, Jacob knew. And so he now protected Joseph as a precious gift. Not that he didn't love his other sons, but he provided for and protect him. And we see immediately when he said that he gave him a coat of many colors. So he was showering Joseph with stuff, and he was guarding him. So he was not sent with them to the field, as they would not. So Joseph was treated, or ahava, Hebrew word for love. In English, we see love as an abstract feeling that we feel, a feeling that we've never felt before, and you know that. But that's not Hebrew. Hebrew is concrete. And so ahava now comes into play where Yosef, you see the physical function of it, and without knowing the Hebrew, you wouldn't understand the coat of many colors. You wouldn't understand the actions of Jacob to Joseph. And the prior verse tells you clearly Joseph's actions as it leads up to verse. We're just in verse 3. And we've seen so much happening that lays the foundation of who Joseph was. And you're going to see more as we unpack this story leading into. Bob Marley says that the rabbi sold I to the merchant ship. So he knew very well that Joseph represented a nation that would be sold into slavery. So he knew that. From the beginning, that was very clear. So we're going to see that as Joseph not only lived out the life of Israel, but because the Ha Mashiach would have lived the life of Israel that we discussed when we discussed Isaiah 53, that he took the life of us from birth to death, to the point where they whipped him like a slave and lynched him, from the point where he was born among the animals, just as we were born among the animals when we came here as slaves. All our children were born among the animals because that's where we lived. Right. So Joseph, in his life, though he wasn't born that way, but going down to Egypt, being sold as a slave, lived that life. And we're going to see that play out. So let us go to chapter 4.
Verse 4.
Sorry, verse 4.
And maybe just something worth clarifying here is that the Most High changed Jacob's name to Israel. And that's why it says now Israel loved Joseph. It's still Jacob the father, but the Most High changed his name to Israel, which means prince, which is where we get why we are called the children of Israel.
Okay, so Stanley, are you ready?
Yes, we're on verse 4.
Yes.
Do you want me to do the CJB or we want to do the KJV?
I think the KJV, because most people have the KJV.
Okay.
And you can, I mean, unless you plan to, let's do both.
I can go between them to get more clarity.
Yeah, for clarity, because we don't want anyone getting lost.
Yeah.
Because we have some persons who are here for the first time also.
Right. So I'll start with the KJV. Verse 4, and I'll go 4 through 6, and I'll read it again in the CJB. So this is verse 4. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Verse 5. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. Verse 6. And he hated unto them, hear I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. Okay, it's about the same. And verse 7, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And it says, verse 8, and his brethren said unto him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Do we want to stop here or keep going?
Continue.
Okay. Verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream and told his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars made obeisance to me. In verse 10, and he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said it to him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brother indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? Verse 11, and his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. Verse 12, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Verse 13, and Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here I am. Verse 14, and he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Verse 15, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seest thou? Verse 16, and he said, I seek my brethren, tell me, pray thee, where they feed their flocks. 17, and the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Verse 19, and he said to one another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Verse 20, come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what become of his dreams. In verse 21, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again.
Hold there. Okay. So you notice Joseph, he moves now from saying, look, you're wrong, and realize his brother's attitude. They rejected him. They didn't only reject him, they tried to remove him. He had a dream, and he saw the 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowing down. And his father responded by saying, shall my mother and your mother and I also bow down to you? This is going to become important as we progress. Just make a mental note of this interpretation of the sun, moon, and the 11 stars, because it's going to come back up. Now, he had a dream, and Yahuwah was now giving him a prophecy, because now he's old enough to start to execute the will of Yahuwah. And his brethren, his father, having a natural reaction to it, yet he tempered himself and chose, being a wise man, to observe. His brethren didn't, because they're so rebellious, they decided to take matters in their own hands. So guess what? I'm going to stop the prophecy from happening. Here's what I'm going to do. If you're not with us, we cannot bow to you. See what's happening here. So here, the brethren, they knew very well, because they were grown in a house where their father had a dream before they were even born. They knew all this. And here, these men who the Bible clearly says was walking in contravention or in disobedience to Torah, decided not to listen, but to try to prevent Yahuwah's word from coming to pass. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to sell, they wanted to kill him. They wanted to shed his blood. But that didn't happen. And we see that Joseph now, as a result, was sold into slavery. And he went to Egypt. and he was framed again. But this was Yahuwah working to bring the very vision and prophecy to pass. When Yahuwah is doing something, sometimes we think we can hinder what he's doing. And the very thing that we do to hinder it is the very thing that actually brings it to pass. The very action that we decide to take to stop the prophecy is the very action that brings it to pass. And for those who know the story, knows where that goes, but I'm going to unpack it for those who don't. So here is Joseph, and he goes into Egypt as a slave. And the Bible says now that Pharaoh, Genesis 41:16. So now Joseph had a dream. Now Pharaoh is going to now have another dream. So Genesis 41, but Pharaoh has more sense than the 11 sons. He has more sense as to how to respond to this dream. Genesis 41:16-28. And so you find that now Pharaoh now has a dream that troubles him. Ready, Stanley?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at the CJB, and you know how.
Yeah, I know. It's okay.
CJB. But it makes it adds some context that the KJV doesn't capture. Do you mind?
I can understand that.
So do you mind?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So in verse 8, one thing that it explains and uses different. So in verse 8 of the KJV, it uses the word dominion. But in the CJB, it says his brothers retorted. So verse 8, his brothers retorted, yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around. And they hated him still more for his dreams and for what he said. So the KJV uses as if they were trying to be oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
But the CJB uses the word bossing us around as if just leadership. Like, so they just didn't want to be told what to do. So they had an issue of following orders. So it wasn't about domination. It was about them. They didn't want to follow orders.
Definitely didn't want to. And go ahead.
That's why they chose to go to Dothan instead of where they were supposed to go to Shechem. So to me, this verse makes it clear that it wasn't about domination. They were so against, like you said in the very beginning in verse 2 and 3, that they were so against Torah and the instructions or the context of being what is considered evil, that they were so far gone that they don't even want to listen. It was just disobedience was a part of their normal character at this point.
And it makes it clear that they knew what he was supposed to be doing.
Right. They knew. So it wasn't.
They knew his station and his position and his calling. They knew.
They knew his call.
And they decided to reject that again. This will show how the rejection of the Ha Mashiach when he came, of us, led to the transatlantic slave trade. Because they rejected him. That is why I say Joseph played the role of us coming into the transatlantic slave trade, as well as the role of the Ha Mashiach and his brethren rejecting him. But we're going to unpack it.
No mistaking. So there was no mistaking of they knew 100% what his calling was, what his position was. So so when you read the KJV, it makes it seem like they were just angry and just didn't want to be oppressed. No, that verse 8 makes it clear that they knew what his position was and just was willing to be disobedient. Another verse that makes a separation is verse 10, where it says, in the KJV, it says, and he told his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to the earth? That's the KJV. But the CJV again makes it clearer. He told us, so verse 10 in the CJB, he told his father too, as well as his brothers, but his father rebuked him. What is this dream you have had? Do you really expect me, your mother, and your brothers to come and prostrate ourselves before you on the ground? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So this drives home again that Joseph,
they were jealous.
that they were jealous, and also the father already having dreams understood. That's why he was able to reserve himself, because he was able to recollect past dreams.
Yes. And they could have interpreted the dream.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew what was happening.
They knew what was happening. And another verse that is also interesting, when we go down to where the brothers are plotting, verses 21, where Reuben interjects. So verse 21 in the CJ base says, when Reuben heard this, he said him from being destroyed by them. He said, we shouldn't take his life. Don't shed blood. This is verse 22. Reuben added, throw him into this cistern here in the wilds, but don't lay hands on him yourselves. At the very end, it says he intended to rescue him from the ladder and restore him to his father. So it actually says that Reuben was actually willing to get back in line. Actually, yeah. It was actually plotting to actually go back and rescue Benjamin.
Yeah. Thank you, Stanley. And that makes it so much clearer. And I understand why Stanley likes to read the CJV, because it just opens stuff up. And we go between for the sake of those who are new and don't yet understand. So if you hear us going between, that's a reason. Now,
can I just ask, just to make sure we're all like on the same page? We're dealing with forms, functions, and feast days. And so how is the story of Jacob intertwined with that theme?
Okay, it lays a foundation because as we said at the beginning, when we left Egypt, that's when these feast days were instituted as a reminder from what Yahuwah has brought us from. So for us to understand the magnitude of the feast day or what they meant to the Hebrews, we would have to see firstly from whence they were coming.
Oh, okay.
Because if I come to you and I just say, get out of the road, and we walk to the sidewalk, and you didn't see the bus coming, you wouldn't know what I just did. But if you knew that you were about to die, and I moved you from that, then you understand exactly what I did. So when we lay the foundation here of how we got to Egypt, the symbolisms that played into us going to Egypt, the symbolism that is going to tie into the Ha Mashiach when he came to be sacrificed for us, and the symbolism that is going to tie into when he comes back again the second time, then we are going to see the full picture of why the feast days were instituted.
Right. Yeah, that clicks in my mind, because I understand that, this Joseph's entire experience being sold off into slavery, of course, has its spiritual foreshadowings and biblical foreshadowings, but him being sold into slavery brought him to Egypt, where he was a ruler, and after that then allowed his family to come into Egypt when the famine came, and then that's why we were in Egypt when that Pharaoh died, and
another Pharaoh
came and then enslaved us in Egypt.
Yes,
which then led to the reasoning for us to be needing the Exodus that Moses then came in to pull us out of. So it's seeing the large picture from the very beginning.
Right. And in Leviticus, we're gonna see how Leviticus 25:48. Can you pull that up for me, Stanley? Leviticus 25:48 shows us how Joseph was the kinsman redeemer in the story.
You said 25:48?
25:48. Remember that Christ is a kinsman redeemer. And we're going to set the foundation for the kinsman redeemer as you brings that in, Siobhan, because we're going to go through this and then unpack it. And we may not get to finish it tonight because it's a lot of information, but we're going to go as slow as persons need us to go so that they understand it. So if for any reason you feel that we've left you behind, don't feel, reluctant to just say, hey, could you repeat that or could you clarify that? So here, Joseph is playing, as I said, two roles, the role of the Ha Mashiach in this situation and the role of us going into Egypt. And look what's going to happen. Leviticus 25:48. You know what? Start at 47, and I'm going to read it then. You ready, Stanley?
Mm-hmm.
Read.
47.
Yeah.
If a foreigner, I'm sorry, I'm using the, what are you using? This KJV?
Go ahead, read whichever.
I'm using NIV. Let me use what you have. And if a sojourner or stranger wax rich by thee, and thy brother that dwelleth by him wax poor, and sell himself unto the stranger or sojourner by thee, or to the stock of the stranger's family, after that he is sold, he may be redeemed again. One of his brethren may redeem him.
9:49.
Either his uncle or his uncle's son may redeem him, or any that is nigh of kin unto him of his family may redeem him, or if be able, he may redeem himself.
Okay, so you remember when we discussed that redemption means to buy back or to avenge of blood. Now, in the Levitical setting, if you are in slavery or you sold yourself into slavery because of poverty, and slavery there is not the same as slavery as we understand it now. In other words, if you make a covenant with someone to say, I will live with you and I will do whatever you want me to do, and you will make certain that I'm fed along with my family, I'm clothed, I'm taken care of, because I don't have land to farm. Because then if you did not have land, you were poor, because everyone lived from the land.
Remember we discussed it. We touched on this in the Discord this week. I don't know if it would
yes, we did.
I don't know if it would be a point worth expounding, but because I don't want to derail from.
No, we can't. Yeah, and we were discussing this at length.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get to it as we go through Exodus.
Right.
But we were discussing this at length in the Discord, and I don't have all the answers yet. Because there were some questions asked in the Discord that we cannot cover now. But yes, it's a subject that we're going to go into. So if you gave yourself to someone that is richer, your kinsman could redeem you or buy you back.
Your kinsman being your brother or your family.
Or someone near of kin. If you didn't have enough money over time to buy yourself back.
Okay.
So this painted the picture of the kinsman redeemer, which is Christ, who is going to come and redeem us from the position that we've been because of sin. Because when Adam and Eve sinned, we discussed earlier that our hearts of flesh was removed by us, and we had a heart of stone, so we now had a nature of sin. So to redeem us from that position, the Hebrew word says that Ga'al is to redeem us, to buy us back, or to avenge of blood. So here we see that Christ is the kinsman redeemer, and that is why he would come from the line of Judah. And that is why Abraham was given the promise that in thy seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So we see here in Leviticus that the role of the kinsman redeemer, as is brought out again in the story of Ruth and Naomi, of Boaz being that kinsman redeemer that would redeem Ruth, being a stranger that is attached or engrafted into the community via Naomi. So we see here, what we're trying to do here is paint a picture of what the kinsman redeemer here is. And of course, now salvation is the next term, which means to rescue. So we here see Joseph is being set up to play the part of a kinsman redeemer, and of course as a savior. And we're gonna see in the name that the Pharaoh gave him, and it's really interesting, that name that Pharaoh gave Joseph. So let us backtrack here now. So the brothers rejected him. I want to emphasize that rejection. And as a result of rejecting him, Yahuwah now sets in motion a series of events that would see the same prophecy being fulfilled. So we move forward now to Pharaoh and his dreaming. Genesis 16, 41:16. And here we see Pharaoh dreaming. Can we go back to Genesis 41:16? Sure. So here we see now the second time a dream comes up. Now Pharaoh is dreaming. So, okay, Yahuwah again gives a dream to someone outside of Israel. It keeps happening in that situation where it happens in Daniel also, where the host nation gets the dream to show what Yahuwah is about to do while his people are among them. Not only that, he was about to bless them because of his people being among them. We saw that again in Daniel. Go ahead, Genesis 41:16.
We're trying to CJV
version.
CJV.
Go ahead,
CJV.
Yeah.
Go ahead, start.
You say you want to do 16?
Yeah, 16.
Okay. All right. So this is according to the CJV. Actually, let me start with 15. Pharaoh said to Yosef, I had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I've heard it said about you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Verse 16. Yosef answered Pharaoh, it isn't in me. Yahuwah will give Pharaoh an answer that will set his mind at peace. Verse 17. Pharaoh said to Yosef, in my dream, I stood at the edge of the river, and there came up out of the river 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they began feeding in the swamp grass. Verse 19. After them there came up out of the river 7 more cows, poor, miserable looking, and lean. I've never seen such bad looking cows in all the land of Egypt. Verse 20. Then the lean and miserable looking cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. We keep going?
Yes. Stop at 28.
Okay. Verse 21, but after they had eaten them up, one couldn't tell that they had eaten them because they were as miserable looking as before. At this point, I woke up. Verse 22, but I dreamed again and saw 7 full ripe ears of grain growing out of a single stalk. Verse 23, after them, 7 ears thin and blasted by the east wind sprang up. Verse 24, and the thin ears swallowed up the 7 ripe ears. I told this to the magicians, but none of them can explain it to me. Verse 25, Yosef said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are the same. Yahuwah has told Pharaoh what he is about to do. 26, the 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. The dreams are the same. Verse 27, likewise, the 7 lean and miserable looking cows that came up after them are 7 years, and also the 7 empty ears blasted by the east wind. There will be 7 years of famine. Verse 28, this is what I told Pharaoh. Yahuwah has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Verse 29, here it is. There will be 7 years of abundance throughout the whole land of Egypt. Verse 30, but afterwards there will come 7 years of famine, and Egypt will forget all the abundance. The famine will consume the land.
Notice what happened here. Joseph said to Pharaoh, Yahuwah has shown you what he is about to do. Without a doubt, we know now that this famine is setting the stage for the prophecy to be fulfilled. So, okay, he had a dream that you're going to bow. You decide you're going to sell him into slavery. So he's now in Egypt. Yahuwah gave him prominence in Egypt. Because understand this, even while he was in prison, he was not in the regular prison. He was where the king's prisoner was kept. Second to that, he was now the servant to the prison warden. And he didn't stay where the rest of, because when you read the Bible, it says that when he comes in the morning and commune with the prisoners, so obviously he didn't sleep where they slept. So while he was in prison, he was not even...
He was set apart.
He was set apart. And I remember that when Isaiah 53 spoke about being imprisoned, it's like he's following the life of the line that the Ha Mashiach would walk, though he didn't go to prison, but he spoke of that sentiment. He followed the line of us. And even when the Ha Mashiach speak of entering the New Jerusalem, he said, I was imprisoned and you didn't do this for me. He spoke, the declaration of the meaning of true religion says that to do what? Visit the poor. Set at liberty them that are bruised. Open the prison doors. So this comes up, it keeps coming up, and Joseph lived this life, though he wasn't sleeping where the rest of prisoners slept. But Yahuwah was setting up an object lesson. So here Yahuwah is about to cause a famine that would wreak havoc, right? Not just Egypt, everywhere. But I believe that this was set up so that the center of sustenance would have been where Joseph was, so that Joseph could have been in charge of the supply that would now rescue or offer salvation to his kinsmen. You see what's happening here? And of course, they would bow to him. Now, the famine went on, and if you read on, could you mute your mic, Yashakai? Okay.
Yeah, my bad. I was going to say before you moved on that there was something that resembled or like a mantle, right? I think that might be the word, where even someone like Joshua, who came after Moses, as great as Moses was, can't take anything from Moses in what he achieved, but Moses wasn't the one that led the people into the land. And the name Joshua, it would translate, to salvation in itself. So with that being said, that would also be like a prior foreshadowing or a foreshadowing of the quote unquote military might that would have been expected from the Messiah. Whether it was physical in reference to a spiritual triumph, or you know what I mean, the mantle does definitely replicate itself, just like you said, in the form of
the coat of many colors also.
Right.
So okay, so thank you for that, Yashakai. So we're gonna see now that, okay, so Genesis 41 verse 45, we're gonna see the name that was given. 41, 45, down. Pharaoh called Joseph by the name Zaphnath Paneah and gave him as his wife Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Zaphnath Paneah means savior of the world.
World or word?
World.
Okay.
How would Pharaoh know this? So guess what? He was sold into slavery to stop the vision. But coming out of that slavery, he was given a name that befits the Ha Mashiach, the savior of the world.
And his life before that was already foreshadowing the Ha Mashiach and
yes,
this in itself.
Because Yehoshua means salvation, savior. And Joseph was given the name Zaphnath Paneah. Stop sharing. Savior of the world. Now, this wasn't a Hebrew that gave him this name. This is a Pharaoh. Now we're seeing that Joseph's life wraps up how we would have gone into the transatlantic slave trade, because understand that the majority of those who left Egypt, 70 souls one person went to Egypt first, Joseph. Then after him, because of the famine, 70 came. Then when they were leaving, close to 2 million left. You know what that means? The majority of those who were in bondage or left Egypt came there because of convenience. The majority of us in the West now are here because of convenience. Persons migrate to the West because of better wages, stuff like that.
In this day and age?
Yes. So, a few million was taken here as slaves. I'm not sure the number now, if someone could bring that up. Yet we have so many more here now that are here, who are either born here or migrated here because of convenience. The parallel between us now and what happened with Joseph. Now, let's move down. So, Genesis 49, and I'm skipping some verses because of time. Jacob dies. But before he dies, let us backtrack a little to when his brothers came to buy grain. All of them bowed to him. But that was not the fulfillment of the prophecy. And I'm going to tell you why. They never knew who they were bowing to. They were bowing to him as a ruler who is basically selling them grain. They weren't bowing to the kinsman redeemer. Yeah. If you see where I'm going. Right. And so Yahuwah was not finished yet. I hope I'm clear. Mm-hmm. So far we've looked at the sun, moon and stars, which remind me to go back to that. We've looked at the rejection. We've looked at him being sold into slavery. We look at now them being redeemed or rescued, saved. Now, watch what's happening. They come, they buy grain, and Joseph is testing them to see whether they had reformed in the heart. So he gave them back their money in their sacks. I don't know if you want to pull it up for me, Stanley. And they went home. He's going to see now whether or not they're going to return that money according to Torah. Because Torah says if you find that which was lost for someone, you need to return it. You know, in the Western, we say finders, keepers.
Losers, weepers.
Yeah, and losers, weepers. Torah does not support that. If you find something for someone, you need to return it. So Joseph was testing them now to see whether or not they had conformed to Torah. So, okay, they went home and they were troubled, and Jacob said, you know what, take it back. No.
This is what, chapter 42 verses, you're at verses 24 through 26, where Joseph puts the money back in his sacks and they find it.
Right. So next here, what's happening now? They're coming back and they comes back for grain. Of course, he accused them of being spies.
Mm-hmm. Verses 30, 31.
Right. They comes back for grain now. Now, guess what? Jacob doesn't want to send his son. And this proves now that he says, look, I've lost Joseph. Now it's Simeon. He's lamenting losing Simeon. That proves that it's not that he did not love Simeon or the rest, when the Bible said that he loved Joseph more. But we explain how he treated and protected Joseph.
Because he understood the prophecy.
Right, exactly. And he understood him as a gift. Now, he now plots a way to keep one to get Benjamin to come. Because I'm going to see now whether or not you have repented for selling me or for throwing me in the pit. And so that goes out, and when they come back and he reveals to them that, look, you have stolen, they all bowed to him, begging him not to treat them, even saying, look, do not keep the lad, take us instead, because our father would die if the lad did not come back. That shows you that the heart that tossed him in the pit was a different heart now. Willing to protect the younger one, not like they did when they selfishly, in rebellion, tossed him in that pit. Now they are willing to die for the younger one.
Which is that ahav that you mentioned before.
That ahav. So that love that is commanded by Torah is now coming into fruition. And so now Yosef is playing the part of that rod in Israel, the lamed, that is now guiding his brethren to righteousness. He was playing it from before when he was saying, you shouldn't be doing this, and they hated him for it. But now he's in a position to actually do it. Again, playing the role not just of the kinsman redeemer, but of the reformer. The Ha Mashiach. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Jacob dies. Genesis 49, Stanley.
Hold on, before you go on, it's interesting. I like to bring up another point reading it, that we, in the CJB, we see Reuben again. Reuben is the oldest, right? Reuben is it's interesting to constantly see how Reuben, as the eldest, is kind of intervening to his father and pleading and putting the ownership of getting Benjamin back, or Benjamin, I can see. In verse 37, it says, Reuben said to his father, if I don't bring him back to you, you can kill my own two sons, put him in my care, and I will return him to you. So in his trying to ease the pain of his father, he said, look, if I don't come back with Benjamin, you can take my own, you can kill my own two sons. I'm going to give you your grandsons, and you can take their lives. And Jacob, or Yaakov, says, but he replied, my son would not go with you. His brother is dead, and he is left alone is left. If anything were to happen to him while traveling with you, you would bring my hair down to Sheol with grief. So pretty much, it's just interesting to see how Reuben is constantly taking ownership. Even though his heart was running contrary to Torah, he still was showing that I'm going to take ownership as the eldest.
Yes, and thank you for that point. That's brilliant. He had that responsibility to take ownership, just as he did, but half-heartedly, when he decided to go along with his brethren,
but not kill him. Let's throw him away.
What he should have done was stood up and said, no. But because he was among the, when you're compromised among a group that does wrong, even when you have a hard change, it's kind of hard for you to say, no, stop now, because they're going to say to you, remember when you did this? So, even though he should have stood up at that time, he didn't. But here comes now the rebound, where he's standing up and saying, look, I'm going to take responsibility now. In the absence of my father, I'm going to take responsibility. And every Hebrew child is trained for that. At age 12, the boy, the son, is ready to take the role of his father and the place of his father. So you are trained for that from birth. So him being older, in excess of 25 years old, because he was the first, well knew what he should have done when they tossed Joseph in the pit. But here is he now before Joseph, not knowing, but now standing up and actually fulfilling his mandate, which represents again when Yahuwah says that he's going to give us a new heart, a heart of flesh, of us actually coming into what we are called to do. And we're going to see what happens when they bowed to him a second time after Jacob dies. Now,
before we move on, Samantha asked, why does Jacob say his brother is dead and he alone is left when the others are alive?
Remember that Benjamin and Joseph was of one mother.
Right.
So they were. That's what he was actually saying. Of that seed, he alone is left. It's not that no one was left, and they understood that.
Yeah, because when they sold him into slavery, when his brothers sold Joseph into slavery, they told Jacob that wolves had eaten him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So all these years, Jacob thought that Joseph was dead while he was in Egypt going through everything that he was going through. And so, just to catch up, when the brothers went to Egypt because of the famine and Joseph sent them back home, Joseph wanted to keep Benjamin at the palace, right?
Yes.
He wanted to keep Benjamin at the palace and send them home to their father. And that's why they had said, no, don't keep Benjamin, because our father would die if he lost this son.
Yes.
Being that he had already lost Joseph.
Not knowing that this is Joseph.
Not knowing that this is Joseph, yeah.
And he stood up and took responsibility there. And let's go to Genesis 50 instead. We're there. And looking at...
Brother Chris.
Yeah.
Stanley had read, actually it says in verse 37 of Genesis, where it says, his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. What was that matter he kept in mind then?
The vision, which we're gonna come to, the vision of the sun, moon, and the 11 stars bowing down to him.
To him, Joseph.
To him, Joseph, yes.
So what I'm saying then, did Jacob believe that he was dead? Because according to what we're reading now, it's like he was sure that Joseph was dead.
He believed that he was dead. So he didn't know that Joseph was still alive. And the Bible doesn't say what he thought of the prophecy or the vision after that, but for a period he believed that Joseph was actually dead.
Okay.
So
pretty much he just says that he knew when he was told the prophecy, he held reservation instead of losing and flipping like, how dare you? He just said, I'm just gonna pause and just think on it. So
right.
But yeah, so he never knew that Joseph was still alive, because he thought in the prophet, he didn't really have a context to say, well, he got to still be alive because of the prophecy.
Right.
He believed what his sons told him.
So you can honestly say he did not really lose all hope then, because the prophecy wasn't fulfilled.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's a kicker. Genesis 50:14. Then after burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he, his brothers, and all that had gone up with him to bury his father. Realizing their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, Joseph may hate us now and pay us back in full for all the sufferings we've caused him. So they sent a message to Joseph which said, your father gave us this order before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you now, please forgive your brothers' crime and wickedness in doing you harm. So now we beg of you, forgive the crime of the servant of that. Crime and wickedness in doing you harm. So we beg of you now, forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him, and his brothers too came, prostrated themselves before him and said, here we are, your slaves. Now, the first time they bowed to him was not as Yosef. But when Yahuwah does something, here the Bible says that every knee shall bow to the Ha Mashiach,
To Ha Mashiach.
or to Ha Mashiach, which is the Messiah. Ha, He means the, Mashiach means king, the anointed, sorry. The Bible says every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. So this bowing in this prophetic line was not enough that they bowed to him not knowing who he was. But for this prophecy to take form, they had to bow to him as Joseph. Just as the prophecy and the vision said it would happen. And so here Yahuwah brought it full circle, created a famine, do all this, affected the universe, so that a group of people would start to see who he was. Just as he paused the entire universe when Yehoshua, Joshua, was fighting the battle for the people who had tricked him. Here we see the power and strength of Yahuwah giving a simple vision that seemed simple but would have effects unto the end of time. Here we see now, after being called Zaphnath Paneah, Savior of the world, they didn't know who the Savior of the world was when they bowed to him. But now that all has been revealed, and now that their heart has changed, a new heart was given to them. Much like when the Bible, I think it was Amos that says that Yahuwah would have poured out the spirit of grace upon us, and we would have mourned for the Ha Mashiach that we have crucified. Understand that they went to Egypt because of the rejection of Joseph. Yahuwah set up this famine that would have pulled them into Egypt. See what is happening after they rejected him, thinking they were going to stop the prophecy. I'm just laying the foundation for how it ties in, how we got the feast days, how Yahuwah orchestrated all of this. How he prophesied in Genesis 15:13 that we would have been in the Western world for 400 years, and how Exodus prefigures or foretells our condition here, and how the feast days become symbolic to us here and relevant to us here. Now, I know some people may feel a bit lost, but bear with me.
I think this is when it's actually coming full circle for me.
Yes. So what is happening here now? We're tying now the sun and the moon and the stars. So here they are bowing to him. That's a pinnacle of where they are. And the Bible says, and there arose another Pharaoh that did not know Joseph, that would enslave our people. And he'll treat us. That's going to take us into bondage and rescue from bondage, redemption, and how that ties into the second coming of Ha Mashiach, or the Messiah, or Christ. Now, let's look at it again in bullet points. And I'm going to bring us to Revelation 12. Can go to Revelation 12 for me? I'm going to bring us full circle to show you how now this ties in with the Ha Mashiach and his people. Revelation 12. So now the first thing we looked at was Joseph's dream. And the main point of that was he saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowing down to him. Jacob immediately identifies the sun and the moon and the star as the patriarch and the children being the 11 sons. Joseph wasn't among that 12 because he was now playing the role of the Ha Mashiach, also playing the role of the kinsman redeemer and also the rod. So what we see here in the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, the only other time that this was mentioned again in the entire Bible, this time it was mentioned to herald them going into Egypt, which would eventually lead to their enslavement. And I say eventually because they weren't enslaved until after Joseph and his generation had died.
So it goes with the prophecy that people think that the 400-year prophecy was in Exodus. It was actually, they spent 430 years total from the time of the prophecy given to Abraham to they left. And only roughly half of that was possibly in
Egypt, right? 200 and maybe 26 in Egypt, right?
Was in slavery.
So the 430 years that the Bible mentions when they were leaving, Shaul explains that when he says that from the promise to the law was 430 years. It means that from Abraham got the promise to when the law was given, meaning that was when the nation was instituted. So Abraham got the promise that there will be a nation coming out of him. When that nation was instituted was when the law was given. And from that point to that point was 430 years.
You get the law at Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai, right.
Right.
So this is what the 430 years represent. However, we only spent 226 years in Egypt. And of that time, only about 100 years maximum the captivity lasted, because if you look at Aaron, the decree that tried to kill Moshe did not happen to Aaron. Mm-hmm. And Aaron was 3 years older than Moshe. It means then that Aaron did not see that kind of oppression at his birth. So Moshe saw it, and when Moshe walked out of Egypt with the children of Israel, he was 80 years old. So we know that at least 80, but the build-up might have happened just before Aaron was born, maybe 20 years, whatever. But we know that the pressure that the Bible speak of did not happen to Aaron at birth. It happened to Moshe. Because Aaron was 3 years old when Moshe was born, when the decree was made to kill all the men children. So let's get back to Revelation, if there's no question on it.
You were talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars.
Right.
And how they got.
So here's Revelation 12. Now a great sign was seen in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun under her feet, the moon with the sun, under her feet the moon, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Now we're having 12 stars instead of 11. But Genesis already identified the stars, the same sun, moon, and stars, as being Israel. Now, if we read the prophecies without going into all of them, we realize that the Ha Mashiach would have come through the line of Judah. Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49 outlines all their blessing on the children. Then it says that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh. So we know that Shiloh, being the rightful ruler or owner, is Christ. So he was saying that the scepter or the whole the law, the scepter, of course, is Torah. The Lamed, right, shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh. In other words, Judah will always remain in control of the temple, and we saw that in the Ha Mashiach without going too deep in that. So here we see now the woman was pregnant and was about to give birth, and she screamed in agony of labor. Another sign was seen in heaven. There was a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 royal crowns, and his tail swept the third parts out of heaven and threw them down to the earth. And it stood in front of the woman about to give birth, so that it might devour the child the moment it was born. No. And she gave birth to a son, a male child. the one who will rule all nations with a staff of iron, the Lamed again. So we see here now, the scepter now would now be transferred to Shiloh, the rightful owner, and Revelation is telling you this. Now, let us unpack Revelation 12, 1 to 5. The sun, moon, and stars. The sun and the moon is the patriarch and the matriarch. We discussed earlier how Torah is passed down personally through lineage. We discussed how the Feast of Tabernacle was designed now to move Torah outside of the direct lineage to all that who would attach themselves. Again, Torah is passed on personally. So here, this part of Revelation, which is not a prophecy, and I know some flags just went up. It wasn't a prophecy, but I'll explain that. Here it was given as a premise, not a prophecy. The sun, moon, and stars. Now, the stars were identified as the crown, now the diadem on the head of this woman. We know the woman in the Bible is Israel. The bride in the Bible is Israel. And she's crowned with a crown of 12 stars. And she's going to give birth to the man-child, the Ha Mashiach, or the Shiloh, who would now, the Bible explains, would now take control of this staff, or this rod of iron. Many people, as we were discussing, think that this rod of iron means to rule with a heavy hand.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, before we move to the rod, the picture kind of came to mind of the woman being Israel, the 12 stars being the 12 sons from which Israel came, and then giving birth to the Ha Mashiach being that Christ came from the line of Judah. So it paints
the collective effort of the 12, of the 1 to the 12, right.
And he's coming right out of Israel to have that staff as the rightful ruler. And I think I don't know, it was just like really cool to see how that one picture that's painted here in like 2 verses
gives the entire lineage,
gives the entire lineage and history and understanding of like generations of events.
Yeah.
You know,
the entire lineage.
I think it reiterates that when Yah puts these images that seem simple on the surface in front of us, there's always a depth that
to them
that extends, like, in ways that things that he can only understand, in the way of like, I am a descendant of one of those stars, right? But if he gave me that image, I wouldn't understand that he just gave me my entire history in one picture.
Picture.
So I'm glad that you're going in and unpacking like these images.
Right. So what we find happening here now is, and I was gonna say something, it slipped me.
The Lamed, rod of iron.
Yeah, the Lamed, the rod of iron. So the Ha Mashiach would know the rod was used to guide the sheep and also defend the sheep from wolves or whatever it is. This rod of iron would be a rod of defense and also a rod of judgment. For those who were aligned to him, it's a rod of defense. For those who were against him, it was a rod of judgment. So here we see now the entire lineage is painted in. Only Yahuwah can do that. I don't know the amount of words there from 1 to 4, but he painted the entire picture of the process of salvation and the lineage to that point. So now, I said that this was not a prophecy. When Yahachanan wrote the Revelation, he was in Ephesus in about AD 96. I know in some circles they say that this prophecy is about the church. One, this woman was before the Son. It means that the Son would have had to, though Christ didn't create a church or establish one, but in saying she would have had to give birth to the son, then the son comes back and create her. That's confusing.
Confusing.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense. And that's how that makes no sense to be prophecy for the church. It doesn't make sense.
Right. And when people say that this was the disciples, but the stars were before the child was born. It means that the child would have had to be born, then come again and select the disciples, which were, it just doesn't make sense. See what I'm saying? So here we see the true prophecy and, of course, the true interpretation coming from Genesis, because we're not adding anything to it. Genesis 37 already told us what the stars were and what the sun and the moon were. So we don't have to even guess about that. So Yehochanan was writing this in AD 96. Christ had been crucified 61 years before, 65 years before, in AD 31. So this wasn't a prophecy. This was a prelude for the real prophecy that would come in Revelation 13. That speak of the dragon being wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Yahuwah and his testimony. The people who would walk in Torah. So Revelation here speaks now to a situation of Israel giving birth to the Messiah, and he was caught up unto Yah and unto a throne where he would rule the world with a rod of iron. No one can dispute that this child would have been the Ha Mashiach. Also, we show tonight, and I hope no one on this forum after tonight would dispute whether or not this woman represented Israel and the 12 star represented the 12 tribes. So we see here now Joseph, again, we're going back to Joseph, is having a dream where they are bowing down to him. They rejected him, sold him into slavery. As a result, he was the one who redeemed them from poverty after the famine had wrought havoc across the entire land. He was the one who saved them from that, and they at last bowed to him and say, essentially, save us. Do not kill us. So we see here, as we look at the foundation, as we unpack how we got to Egypt, we see the situation, we see the whole prophecy of the Ha Mashiach being played out, and our life in Western bondage as we are now being played out. So we know that when the Ha Mashiach went to Gethsemane, then to Calvary, we know that it was our people who rejected him. We discussed last week, it was when we discussed there's no other name, and we looked at how many times we tried to find salvation on our own. Again, trying to find a savior, trying to redeem ourselves. Now we see that the rejection now of the Ha Mashiach would basically now catapult over again Joseph's dream. Now the sun and the moon and the star comes again now as a prelude to us going into transatlantic slave trade. Just as it came as a prelude before we went to the first Egypt. And then Deuteronomy said before we got to Canaan, before we even set foot in Canaan, Moses said to us, Yahuwah is saying, I will bring you back into Egypt again on ships. And the way which I spoke to you shall not see it again. In other words, before we got to Canaan, we were told that we're going back to Egypt. Now on the onset of the second journey into Egypt, the stars and the moon and the sun comes back up again as a preface or a premise to the real prophecy in Revelation 13, when it says just the arrow, just click over. The arrow, just click over.
You have to share the screen.
Oh.
13.
No, go back to 12. Let me go down.
Staff of Iron.
Okay. And when the dragon saw that he had been hurled down to the earth, he went in pursuit of the woman who had given birth to the male child. So persecution, we know, would have broken out. Because Christ said it in Matthew 24. He outlined all of that. But it wouldn't end there. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she could fly to her place in the desert where she is taken care of for a season and 2 seasons and half a season. Some translation translate this as 1260 years. We will not get into that prophecy tonight because we're not. It's really deep and we're not dealing with that right now. And away from the serpent's presence. The serpent spewed water like a river out of its mouth after the woman in order to sweep her away in the flood. Now we know that flood water represents false doctrines and false stuff. So let's not get too deep into that. But the land came to her rescue. It opened its mouth and swallowed up the river which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. The dragon was infuriated over the woman and went off to fight the rest of her children, those who obeyed God's commandment and bear witness to Yehoshua. Then the dragon stood on the seashore. Go to 13 now. And I saw a beast come up out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 royal crowns, and on his head blasphemous names. The beast which I saw was like a leopard, but with feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like the lion of a lion. I mixed up. Sorry.
And a mouth like the mouth of a lion.
To it the dragon gave its power, its throne, and great authority. One of the heads of the beast appeared to have received a fatal wound, but his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth followed after the beast in amazement. They worshipped the dragon because he had given it the authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast?" So we see here, without going into the symbolisms, we're going to get to that after this series. The point I'm making here is that the onslaught would now intensify after. In Matthew 24, it speaks of the flight and the desolation. For those who weren't here, this flight and desolation started when Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. Tons of our people were killed. Some who knew and understood the warning of the Ha Mashiach had fled before. In Daniel 11, it says that, and from the time that the daily sacrifices, Christ was sacrificed, was taken away means that the sacrifice of the feast days would have ceased to happen while the feast days continued. In other words, after Christ's death, you wouldn't need to sacrifice lambs anymore. So from the time the daily sacrifice were taken away, the crucifixion of Christ, and the abomination spoken of by Daniel set up the siege of Jerusalem, there shall be 1290 days. Ezekiel 4 verse 6 tells that a year, day for a year. 1290 years from the time that Jerusalem was destroyed landed us in 1360 when the expulsion edict was given to expel all Hebrews from Europe, all of Europe. What happened is that we were left on the western portion of Africa. Some of us were killed, and our children in the Inquisition that was set up by the Catholic to force us to accept. I'm going to use a word here, and this word does not demean any person who followed this system. I'm just giving you the historical reference. The Catholic said, accept Christianity. And the Hebrew says no. And they killed all they could. and they sent the children that they took from these Hebrews to the Caribbean, and that's why in Jamaica we have Saint Thomas, Saint Anne, and the names, and the Western world have Christian. That's why we have Christian names, because we were a product of that enslavement. And so Hebrews now was plunged into the period that would begin Genesis 15:13. Know of a surety that thy children shall be strangers in the land that is not theirs, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So this is where the 400 years comes in. I'm just trying to tie it up for you. So what Yohanan saw in Revelation 12 about the sun and moon and the stars was again a preface to us coming into the second and final Egypt. And what Joseph saw was a prelude for them going into the first Egypt. And what we're going to do from here is show you how everything in Exodus parallels and explains what would have happened to us today. Our lives, everything as we close. And we're going to close on this tonight, but it gets way deeper. It gets way more interesting, but it shows you how it was not by coincidence that Joseph had that vision, how the moon and stars and the sun came into play, how he played the role that he played, how they had to bow to him, knowing he would. He was who he was, and say, save us, do not kill us. Acknowledging that their very life and livelihood depended on his mercy and his grace, and grace, of course, being the hen, which is het noon, which represents a wall and a seed, which means a continuous wall or a house, or the continuation of the seed. You could see here now that grace literally represents the continuation of the seed, because they depended on Joseph for their very life the next minute, because if he said no, you're going to die the next minute. So here they bowed to Joseph with the full understanding that the continuation of the seed or grace depended literally on him. So the first bowing to him was not important, because they didn't know who they were bowing to. But now that you're bowing, you understand that he now represents the kinsman redeemer, because he's your blood, that's your kinsman, and he's the one that's going to redeem you. So it gets deeper, and as we go into Exodus, we're going to see how it parallels Revelation, 7 last plagues, 10 plagues in Egypt. We're going to see all that coming up to us, and the feast days and all that. But as we close, I think we have a far way to go. But
I think that was great. I think just
it is so, like you said, it's so much deeper. And one thing that, if people want to say or ask the question, like myself, like, how does this relate to actual history? Well, it relates to history, especially with when you talk about how the last portion, when we talk about how the Hebrews, you look at the Inquisition. That's what the Inquisition was about. The Inquisition was about persecuting those who they viewed as heretics. And just like it said in that prophecy, that when it says the dragon spewed out water, that's false doctrine. Well, they were making people believe the doctrine that they created, not what Scripture said. That's why they changed the language, used Greek, and said you can't even use the Hebrew language.
Right.
You got to use Greek. You got to talk Greek. You have to be like the Greeks, because that's the way we're delivering it to you. And so that's what the Inquisition was about. They try to paint it that it was Christians killing Christians, and that doesn't make sense. It was Christians killing Hebrews.
Yes, and to add to add to what you're saying, you brought out that point, and of course it's understood, and we're going to go deeper in it, but that is why now in the seminaries they are taught Greek and Latin and a little bit of Hebrew, because Greek wasn't just adapted, neither English. English is a blood language, we have to understand that. Many millions were killed for English to have the position it has even though it's not the most prominent language spoken in the world. I mean, though we think English is the most prominent, it's not the most popular language. Actually, it's not. But the Greek society, and that is why you find a lot of our society has so much Greek and Roman culture, because the Greek was the ones who started this, and the Romans continued. And the Greek society launched a campaign to wipe out all Hebrews. And that is why they did what they did. That is why it was changed to Greek from Hebrew. Because the idea was you cannot move Hebrew with Hebrew still there, because the words are concrete. And they mean what they say. So for you to change the meaning or change the understanding of this passage, you're going to have to change the language to give us a language that you determine what the meaning of the words are. So again, the dragon spewing out that flood. I wasn't going to go into it, Stanley, because, but just for clarity, just because you prompted it. But yeah, so we are here not by chance. The very conditions that would have led to us being here and how we came here, and in terms of ratios of number, coming here firstly because of slavery, rising to prominence, then going back. Just understand that this season is being eclipsed by one set wanting to push us down, and the other trying to push us, is giving us prominent positions. Just understand what is happening here, because the deliverance is coming. Also, the majority of us now who are here now, who will live here, did not come here as slave, but was born here. And some of us came here because of convenience. So all that scenario was wrapped up in Joseph and his family going to Egypt. And of course, we know that like Joseph, like all of us, like Moses, like Israel going to Egypt at the infant stage, the Ha Mashiach, when he was born, went to Egypt under the very circumstance that Moshe went to Egypt. Guys? Oh, the kids is running. Yeah, but you can't be right here. So we see, when you look deeper, and we're gonna go deeper into it as we go, but it unpacks so much of the history and explains so much of what is happening to us now and why it is happening. Again, go ahead.
Just a side note, sorry. So how it's sounding, it kind of translate like coming out of the wilderness, so to speak, under Moses and Joshua type of transition between coming out of Egypt, or the ideals and other things that our people have been through in the process of not only understanding who we are, but internalizing Torah and representing Torah to come into the fullness and going into the land. Yeah.
So and when we get deeper, we're gonna look at the symbolism of the 40 years multiplied by 10 to give us a 400 years, and anything multiplied by 10 in Hebrew represents a completion, the fullness. So this wilderness that you're talking about, Yashakai, yes, this wilderness represents that wilderness, but we're gonna go into it as we go down, but we have to leave it here.
and yeah, there was so much said that I think, like, even me, I'm gonna go back to this video and have to like rewatch, because it really is important to understand not only where we are, but where we're coming from, to truly have perspective on where we are, to then truly understand where it is that we're called to go from here. And
yes,
I think painting that image through scripture, I think it's beautiful that the books that we read from today were the very first book and the very last book. It shows the fullness and the length at which Yah will go in these simple things It shows the importance of diving deeper from the abstract into the concrete, to understand that these pictures are not just pictures. These numbers are not just numbers. Our existence isn't just by chance, but everything has depth to it, and that's why it's important to really dive in and understand what's really there, based on the history and the context and the understanding of the fullness of the truth that the Most High graciously is continuing to reveal to us.
So if there's any other question before we close or as we close?
I was, if you don't mind, I was going to say, for historical reference points, like I said, people can research the Inquisition, even for the time of Joseph and the time of the invasion. You can look for the time of Joseph. You can actually research. For the time of the Hebrews in Egypt, you can research the land of Goshen. So you can actually just go to Google search and search land of Goshen and the city of Avarice, which is Avarice. If you search that, you'll see that scientists actually unearthed evidence of Hebrews in Egypt. You can also research the Hyksos invasion. This was a time where it actually correlates with the Bible, when it says that the new Pharaoh came in and didn't know who Joseph was. Yes. So this was the time of the Hyksos invasion. The only thing they're Assyrians, pretty much they're Assyrians, modern day Assyrians. 52:4, I think, says it, when Isaiah said that when we sojourned in Egypt, the Assyrians oppressed us there. So the Pharaoh really did not know Joseph. No. And so technically, by technicality, it was not an Egyptian Pharaoh. No. They were more so, when we say Egyptians, we say Egyptians more so by nationality, not ethnicity. They were Assyrians, or the Hyksos. So if you search the Hyksos invasion, that will actually show and timeline. It'll line up exactly to the Bible. The only thing what will happen, what scientists will do, they say it happened too early, so the dates are off. And there's a big movement now of scientists that are trying to actually get the archaeologists to actually revisit the timeline structure, because they're seeing the evidence points to this, but they're saying, oh, it happened too late or too early.
Right.
And then, like I said, and then you'll, like I said, for the modern interpretation of what happens, like I said, you just search the Inquisition. And so, like that is the actual historical evidence that points to how the Bible actually happening, not just it just being something that we just believe to make us feel good. It's actually history that points to it.
Right. And Stanley, Samantha asked if you could leave those in the chat. And I want to again just encourage anybody as you go into this week, when we post up this video, if you find yourself researching and looking, and we implore you to look up these things, we implore you to look up these things for Mommy, can I turn that down there? We implore you guys to look up these things for yourselves, so we can come into this deeper understanding for ourselves, not just to hear it and it sounds good, but to really understand it and allow the Most High to really teach us personally, And again, if you find yourself researching and you want to ask questions or post findings or post insights that you may discover yourself, please join the Discord chat that we have. Stanley, if you can leave the link for that as well. Join the Discord chat that we have, and we can talk about these things as we're researching, as we're studying, as we're finding out these things, and sharing our understandings, our concerns, our questions. It's a great place to encourage these discussions as we're learning to learn together, and not just on our own. So I encourage you guys to join the Discord as well.
Okay, so is that it?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm putting this stuff in the chat for the folks.
Yeah, so
thank you.
Hello.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say thank you. I saw that you've started putting the verses in the description as I asked.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wow.
I had a question.
Yes.
It's not really relating to today, but it's just like a question that I always had. So like how in the Bible, like Jesus was in the desert and he was fasting, and then the devil came to tempt him, right? And then he said something like something about the keys, right? And like how when he died and he went to hell and he fought the devil and he got back the keys. So does that mean that he had the keys? Like,
okay, so let me clarify something. He didn't go to hell when he died.
oh,
The Bible, when it says hell, Hades or Sheol, it could mean the grave.
Great.
His resurrection from the dead is what gives us hope. Because, let me put it in a nutshell, all the sacrifices in the Old Testament pointed to him. However, those sacrifices, those lambs remain dead. And the priest who sacrificed those lambs died, as the Hebrew says. So the Hebrew says that in all that we were looking for a priest that would basically defeat death.
So that we wouldn't have to continue over
and over again. And by him defeating death, was now able to give us eternal life. Just like these sacrifices then could not give us eternal life. If Christ did not raise, he could not give us eternal life. If you're following me. So when the Bible says that he got the key, it represented that the fact that he said that I'm laying down my life and I will take it up again. I hear people preaching saying that Gabriel was sent. No. He laid down his life and he took it up. But that's a whole nother subject. But the fact that he took up his life again, it means that he, as the Hebrew says, that is able to succor us, to comfort us. Because now that he liveth to make intercession for us. Seeing that, so that means that the keys here means that the keys to hell, it means that he now has the right to condemn sinners to hell or to destruction, which we will cover in another time, the whole subject of hell and the misinformation of it and around it, but not now, but sufficing to say that he didn't go to hell, he went to the grave. And that is what they interpret as hell. But it wasn't hell as in condemnation hell.
And when you
just as a side note, if I mean, I know it's the end of the discussion, not necessarily wanted to prolong it, but it's something very, very interesting as a topic. The understanding of the Messiah as the way or the Redeemer also ties in to the same concept, because there's a concept of us being amongst dry bones, like basically like zombies, living dead without the breath of life that the Most High would have put into us. So that is a more practical understanding of how it might represent itself or manifest in the physical world. So with that being said, seeing that the Messiah would have put his life and on the line, or been able to become like the dead and then again be resurrected and find the breath of life, the keys would not only show that, or not only represent the ability for him to damn someone, but also for him to justify someone with the understanding, the way, because he understands, he actually went through it, he understands the context of what life is, right, and what death is, and what would deem someone redeemable or not.
Right, and even more, and correct me if I'm wrong on that point, Yash. When we talk about the priest sacrificing the lambs, that blood was to cover the sins of the people so that they would not be condemned. But because, of course, those priests were men and those lambs remained dead, they had to continue to make intercession for these sins
over and over.
But when Yeshua died, or Christ, when Christ went to the grave and came back up to live eternally, he ever liveth to make intercession, meaning that he is the high priest that no longer, that will not die. That means when his blood can cover us, of course, so long as we're walking in his instruction and in Torah, so that we can remain within grace, which is that shelter. When his blood covers us, it's not like when the priest had to go in there every week. His blood can continue to cover us, so that we are not eternally damned, but eternally justified. And justified because we follow his instructions, right? And walk in Torah. So then that there's the hope there, where that's how he has power over death.
And that is how we're seeing now how what people call the New Testament, again, coming out of that period that was designed to hide the truth of the Bible, was actually Torah in living form. The Ha Mashiach himself actually living out Torah as an example for us to follow. So they go hand in hand. And the young lady who asked a question, thank you very much for that question, because it brought out some really salient point.
Absolutely.
I didn't get your name, but thank you very much for that question about the cross and dying.
I think we have a question.
You're welcome. Thank you for answering.
All right.
Karina asks, did you feast for Purim?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, we're still learning the feast. And so I just found out about Purim like maybe
a couple of days ago.
Yeah, like a week. Like I found out like a week ago, and I was like watching a few videos on it. But again, for me at least, the feasts are not something to just keep in vain. Like we want to understand the meaning of them, the history behind them, so that when we celebrate them in the fullness, and we can experience the fullness of what the Most High wants to draw us into. So we're still learning. For me, from what I know, we didn't get to do the feast this year, but hopefully by next year, between now and then, we'll understand more to actually have that feast.
And also, we must make this distinction also. Purim is not one of the commanded feast. There's a number of feasts in the Hebrew culture that came out of experiences, like just like you would celebrate your anniversary, whether it's a wedding anniversary or when you started this job or this company, you celebrate that. Israel developed this culture of celebrating times when Yahweh did a marked miracle in the nation.
Yeah.
So outside of the feasts that were commanded in Leviticus 23, there were other feasts that were added over time. Nothing wrong with that, because you can choose anything. You can choose today when you found out about Torah and mark it and celebrate it every year as a day when you found out. Yahweh accepts that. So we have to just make the distinction. So if you're looking to find that in Leviticus 23, you're not going to see it. Because as you said at the beginning, it came out of when Esther stepped up and said, if I perish, I perish.
That sounds like, or one thing to tie into that would be like the Feast of Dedication that happened with Judas Maccabeus.
Right.
That is expressed in the Apocrypha. And seeing that we brought up, we're speaking on this briefly. And that also ties into the general topic of the Exodus. Like for anybody that is interested in understanding those feasts or solemn assemblies that we were commanded to, next major Passover. So for those that don't know, that's essentially the fourth. That's what we've been talking about. Essentially, the process of that was commanded. I think that was actually the first solemn feast next to Shabbat, right?
Yes.
For us we ought to honor, and it is a representation of the Exodus, which also ties into the Messiah, or foreshadowing the Messiah dying for us.
Yes, and which is the first feast day we're going to look in and what it means, and wow, that's going to be exciting. What that means for us, the feast Passover, the first feast instituted, and already you can see the first thing they said, tomorrow is going to be a new month for your new year. It means that the first minute of the first hour of the first day of the first week of the first month of the first year, time starts over tomorrow. Already we gave the spoiler for that. That represents a second coming when he's going to say to us now, from henceforth you're going to live forever. The beginning of eternity. So immediately Passover becomes, it's the first one, and it's going to tell you immediately how it relates to where we are today. So without giving away too much, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's going to be forms, function, and feast days. Invite your friends, send the link, invite your friends, because we want to give this word, send this word out as much as possible. It's not for us alone. We believe that Yahuwah has called all of us who've been here from the beginning as a group to start to build so we can reach out.
Absolutely. As has always been our function.
As always. Toda Rabbah.
Yeah, all praise to the Most High. We'll see you guys next week, same time. Please don't be shy to join the Discord and share any questions, thoughts, or just anything that's happening throughout the week. We have some good discussions in there. So much love to you all, and thanks again for joining this week. Oh, and this will be on YouTube. We'll be uploading this on our YouTube channel. I think Sunny left the link if you want to revisit this lesson.
Yep. It's happening. Both had a link to YouTube and the Discord.
All right. Right. Shalom, shalom. Well, Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Blessings.
I just want to say, thank you guys so much, especially for today's session. I really learned a lot, and it's really made me want to dive deep, because there are a lot of things that I was taught growing up that I blindly followed. So, now I'm just I have the desire, I guess, to dive deeper and get to know more, and to walk, not blindly, like you said at the beginning, that faith is not just some blind thing, but it's you following what you know, and that is God. So that has made me want to get to actually know God for myself, and not just based on what other people have said. So thank you guys so much for this sessions.
Toda Rabbah, you're welcome.
All praises to the Most High.
We need to start having some outro music or something.
The beatboxer.
Oh.